second question. It just seems like in today's world, spiritual transformation is a lot of work. People have so many challenges. Some can't pay their bills, others are out of work. Now we're faced with getting vaccinated to get or keep a job. We're threatened with vaccine passports. Businesses have had to close permanently. People's livelihoods have been destroyed. In these very difficult times, how can people pursue a spiritual approach when there are so many other pressing priorities?
So, of course, this is a question I've been asked quite a bit from time to time, and people have said, I love your school. I have great experiences when I come to your evening programs and your courses, but I've got to figure out how to pay my bills first, and I've got to find my soulmate first and make sure that my future is insured, and then I'll come back and dive into the spiritual journey. Well, by then it'll be too late. so this is part of useless tendencies that cause us to think this way that we have to discard. The best thing we can do, the best thing the person who asked this question and made this statement can do, first and foremost, because our highest priority in life is first to know who we are. You have to know who you are. As long as there's an identity crisis, everything is going to appear to be impossible to face. The first and highest priority is to know who we are. Everything we do in life, we actually do, whether we know it or not, to experience happiness. We're all seeking to be happy, and we all want to be loved. The problem is we look for love and happiness where they are not. True happiness and love can never be found in objects, people, places, and things that are all transient and ephemeral. The freedom is in knowing who we are, in knowing our God nature, in turning our minds within consistently enough so that the mind wants to experience indescribable joy, the bliss of the self, the love of the true heart. These are our God nature, part of our God power. And so I went through this. I went to my guru because right after I met him, I was living in a poor neighborhood. Gangbangers were breaking into my apartment. They firebombed my car more than once. Other times they would come by and take the tires, break in and take the battery and the engine parts. I had this relationship where I was doing community policing in the neighborhood, and so I was a target of the gangs that I was attempting to move out of the neighborhood. And these things were occurring left, right, and center. My life was being threatened. 3 times my car was firebombed. Come out in the morning, my car's on fire. And I knew who did it, and I knew why they did it, because I was working with police to get them arrested, right? And so other times they'd be at my door, pushing the door in. I had a guy who threatened me at gunpoint. I was up practicing my violin on the 5th floor in my studio apartment. And when he called me out and I wouldn't come, he would return to the street at 3 a.m. in the morning, blasting a boombox. I mean, really loud. He woke up the entire neighborhood. And then he would sit on the stoop of the building and yell up to me, cursing at me, saying, I'm here. I'm going to blast this music until you come down to talk to me. And so first I went to my guru and I said, look, I came to you to experience peace and love and grace, and my life is falling apart. I said, look at what I'm having to go through. I live in a neighborhood that's so crappy. I've got criminals destroying my life. You said things were going to get better, is what I told my spiritual guru. But I'm living in a hell. And then I said, and you're responsible. The message I got back from my spiritual guru is, 1, stop complaining. You're always complaining. Why are you complaining? Why can't you just give thanks to God? Give thanks, he would say. Every day that you wake up, give thanks. Stop complaining. And then he said, so what? You have a problem with people breaking in, destroying your car? And he said, these are your karmas. So address them. Address them. And then the last thing he said is, love those who are transgressing. Love those who are causing you harm. And then watch what happens. And so I was taught that if we access that reservoir of indescribable joy, and it does take some practice, but even in the early stages, we can experience it. If we are at peace with ourselves, content because we have found happiness where it actually exists inside, we become more intelligent in the moment from moment to moment, and we are led by grace. We are led by this highest power of grace, which is the supreme intelligence on the planet. And then we know how to proceed next by way of inner inspiration, by being inspired by our God nature. So in the situation I just described to you, when my spiritual guru said, stop complaining, and of course my ego went, what do you mean stop complaining? You're not going through what I'm going through. Did your car get firebombed? And then he said, and why can't you be grateful? Grateful for what? They steal my money, they're threatening my life. And then he said, and you've got to love these characters. And I said, oh, no, that's complete garbage. So I had to sit with it. And as I contemplated what he said and found a glimmer of truth in it, I went with that. So here's what happened, to make a long story short. This gangbanger who had threatened my life had also killed several taxi drivers in a very short period. In other words, he would get in, take a taxi from wherever he was performing his crime, and he lived in the neighborhood. They would bring him back and he wouldn't pay the fare. And so when they rushed him as he got out of the car, he would shoot them. And we all knew this was going on. And I was working with undercover cops and I kept reporting him and nothing got done. Here's what I found out. He was a confidential informant in the precinct of my neighborhood. And the captain finally told me, we can't touch him. He gives us intelligence on bigger criminals. And the captain said, that's all I can tell you. I can't arrest him. He's allowed to commit crimes because he brings us bigger criminals. This is what confidential informants do. And this is the agreement that they have with police and the FBI. So that's why he was committing murder and would never be brought to justice. At first, when I heard the captain tell me this, I said, oh, I'm going back to this idiot who's my guru, and I got to explain to him now what I'm faced with because he doesn't understand. And I'm sure he's going to tell me something different. But I waited. And like I said, I had this glimmer of experience of truth in his former instruction. And here's what happened. It was just like that. It was an inspiration one day that said, look, if the cops can't do anything, I can. And the next thing I heard from inside is, talk to this guy, get to know him, find out why he commits crimes. And I had never thought that that was even possible. This was a huge turning point in my own transformation. That one night, when he was down on the stoop, 3 a.m. in the morning, blasting music, gun in hand, calling me out, I went down. And he expected a fight, and I simply sat down next to him very lovingly, and I said, look, before you shoot me, I'd like to talk to you, man to man. And he looked at me and he said, make it quick. And I said, look, all I want to know is, why do you do this? Why do you murder people? Why do you commit crimes? I really want to know. And his first answer was, it's the only way to get respect. I'm respected wherever I go, he said, no matter where I go. My reputation precedes me. I have respect. And I said, okay, And how long does that respect last? Are you telling me that you're respected at all times? And he says, no. And I said, does that mean that you have to constantly fight to get respect? And he said, yeah, but I've got a gun and I've got a gang behind me and I'm always the winner. And I said, why do you feel that this is the way you need to get respect? And he looked at me and he laughed. And then he said, you have no idea of what I've been through. And I said, no, I don't. Tell me. And he started to open up. And, I could have never uh, projected that this would happen. This had to be God's grace. This had to be my guru's grace. That he said, look, I'm going to tell you a quick story. And he started talking about the fact that he was abused by his parents, left for homeless, and he began sharing his life story with me. And that created an opening. And then I said, well, look, let me share with you some of what I've been through. And we had some similarities growing up, particularly with respect to parental abuse and abuse by teachers. He was sexually abused. And so by the time we got done, we had developed some rapport. It was amazing. And I said, look, I'd like to continue this conversation with you. You can come and knock on my door anytime. The very next evening, he was back. He didn't have his gun drawn this time. He didn't have his boombox. We sat on the stoop outside, out in the open, and we just talked some more. So to make a long story short, I finally said to him, look, we're different in one respect. I have chosen to address my trauma, my abuse, with love. And you've chosen to address it by replicating the very behavior that was visited upon you. That's the difference. And I said, I'm sorry that you've gone through everything you've gone through. I hope some of what I've shared has helped you. And now I'm asking you to take your gang and leave my neighborhood. And he looked at me and he said, all right, like that. He said, fine. We'll never come back to the block. That's it. I'll promise you that. We're going to leave you alone. We're going to leave the neighbors alone. You'll never see us here. And I said, great. And I thanked him for that. And I said, I hope you come visit with me from time to time. And I thought nothing of it from there, except that I went back, rushed to my Guru Dev, and I thanked him for the instruction he gave me. This gang and this gang leader, this criminal, they never came back. He held to his word. But here's something else that happened. He was still a confidential informant. Cabbies who saw him would try and race past him because they knew, I'm going to get shot if I pick this guy up. But there were a couple of instances with people who I knew in the neighborhood who were cab drivers who came back to me and said, look, I didn't see him. It was late. And I saw somebody in the dark. I stopped to pick up a passenger, only realized it was him after he opened the door and he got in, but he paid me in advance. And I said, what? Are you telling me that this guy who's been shooting cab drivers paid you to drive him? He said, yeah. And I heard this from more than one cabbie. So, who knows what form God will appear? I had no expectation in my conversations with him. I had no expectation that one day he would actually stop shooting cab drivers. But that's what happened. All that happened because I extended some love and light by way of the instruction my spiritual guru gave me, by loving him. And it doesn't mean that my trials in that neighborhood were over, because other gangs came in to replace them. But I approached those situations entirely differently in my attempts to clean up the neighborhood with our community policing. So I just share this with you because the difference, had that happened before I met my guru, I would likely be dead, because there's no way that I could have responded or reacted, I should say, in any other way but with anger with respect to what happened to me. But I had found the source of happiness within myself. And so I felt, well, I'm responsible regardless of situations or circumstances. I am responsible for whether or not I'm going to experience happiness, content, and peace, even in the most difficult of circumstances. I'm responsible for that because I've been given tools that I have used and they have worked. So I know where love is, it's inside me. I know where happiness is, it's inside me. I know where compassion is, it's inside me. I've done the tests, I have the proof over extended period of time. So because I've been taught so well by the great spiritual leadership in the model I had in my spiritual guru, I made very rapid strides in a way that I was able to, in the worst of situations and circumstances, remain happy, remain content, experience indescribable joy even in those circumstances. And that required practice and it required training and it required discipline, but I cannot say it was a struggle. It wasn't. Why? Because I came to enjoy the discipline and I forgot about the goal. I simply enjoyed the discipline. And so much unfolded from that. So you got to know who you are and where happiness actually is. You can't express peace and love until you know where those are within you, within your God nature. And then they're able to be expressed spontaneously, even when you have not yet gained mastery over becoming that, right? So,
Thank you so much.
sure.
So, our third question: is discipline necessary for permanent spiritual transformation and well being? And how much work is required?
I'm laughing, but I'm not laughing at the person who posed these questions. I'm laughing, remembering my own predicament, and the joy of the Lord is what causes me to laugh right now because I completely understand. And this is also a question that I get quite often, and it's a question that I pose to my own guru. Discipline is necessary with anything in life for which we have a worthwhile goal that we want to experience and become one with. This is true in any field. We want to become a great litigating attorney, requires discipline over an extended period of time. We want to become a great athlete, as I once did, requires a great deal of discipline over an extended period of time. We want to become really good in business, requires discipline and sacrifice. Discipline and sacrifice are one and the same over a great deal of time. So with anything that's worthwhile, where we want to become better, greater at what we do, and in particular fields developed in expertise, we know that there's a discipline that we have to embrace. And it's the same in spiritual life. It's the same with making the spiritual journey. If we want permanent spiritual transformation, there is a discipline that must be instructed by a model who has become one with the discipline that we are being instructed in. Just like anything else, we go to school, the teachers test us. We don't tell the teachers how they're going to test us. There's an authority who knows more or who is an expert in what we're attempting to learn, and we follow that authority. This is the way of life. And so in spiritual life, it's no different. We need that model. We need that leadership in that model of attainment that we are seeking. And so there is a discipline. And I followed a discipline, true, for many years. However, and how much work is required. So, everybody wants to know, before I get into this, how much effort am I going to have to put forth? Well, who can answer that question? That question is answered based on need. Some people are farther along in the journey home spiritually than others. Some people have more difficult karmas than others. Some people have less spiritual awareness than others. And so more time is going to be involved, more effort is going to be involved. However, when we think of effort and when we think of discipline, let me give you a couple of examples. I trained to become a concert violinist. In the early part of my training, I had to practice 8 hours of each and every single day, 7 days a week. Why? Because there was technique that I had to learn to play these very difficult concertos. Any performing artist who has to master an instrument will tell you this, right? It's hours and hours because part of the technical training is to train the muscles. In this case, I was playing violin. And so in violin performance, you have to get to the point where you no longer have to think in your mind about where your fingers have to go. You've practiced a concerto over and over and over and over again so that your fingers develop their own memory about where they need to go on the strings. And arm position, right? With respect to bowing, the bow on the violin, there's training for that. But in order to perform from memory in a concert where you're performing for an audience of hundreds or thousands of people, you have to reach the point of mastery where you no longer have to think about where your fingers have to go and where your arm position needs to be to play the instrument. That has to become second nature. Once that does, you don't need to practice 8 hours a day. So I started for many years, 8 hours a day. But once I achieved a certain level of mastery, the discipline got easier and easier and easier. And so I went from having to practice 8 hours a day to eventually only 2 hours a day, just for maintenance, to be able to play the same repertoire of concertos because I had trained the muscles, I had trained the fingers, I had trained my mind, I had trained myself in a way that I could express, to make the violin sing, to express emotions, right? And so the discipline, if it's a true discipline, over time it becomes easier. Why? Because you have to learn to derive joy from the discipline itself and detach yourself from the outcome you want. There is a goal, but once you know there is a goal, you forget about the goal and you focus on the discipline for the day that you're on. This was also the case with me in athletics. That when I began training for Olympic speed skating, for example, for the Olympic mile and the marathon, and then at one point I was engaged in going to the Olympics for martial arts competitions, that in the first few years of training, it was very difficult. And I found the discipline difficult, and it was a lot of effort to maintain that discipline. But after a good number of years of maintaining it, it got easier. And principally, it got easier because my mind, that was so restless and so concerned about the discipline, began to love the discipline. And then it got so much easier. So, the discipline, the methods, the instruction are not hard. We are hard. You are hard. The path is not hard. You are hard. And I used to be very, very hard. And so, yes, there's discipline. Yes, that implies sacrifices that will have to be made for a period of time. Yes, you have to follow instruction and methods that are effective to begin to master them. All that is true. But if you fall in love with, so to speak, the discipline, then you will not experience struggle and suffering when you follow the discipline. So I began to love my training exercises for training my fingers on the violin. I began to love the repetitive martial arts kicks and punches that I had to do over and over again to train my muscles and to train my mind. And in spiritual life, I began to love the discipline of mantra repetition, chanting, meditation, and I forgot about the goal. I derived so much joy from the journey. So here's the thing. One day I used to climb mountains, right? And Vermont is a great place to go. Killington is a very high peak. I used to go with friends and climb Killington Peak. And when I first started climbing Killington, we would drive. I was living in New York City, and we would drive to Vermont, and I would be watching my watch, And I created so much anxiety for myself because I would say, when are we going to get there? I want to climb the mountain. I was so anxious, right? But on the way to Killington, when you get into Vermont, there's so much beauty, beautiful fields stretched out for miles, many wonderful lush gardens, pine forests. And so what happened in one of these drives to climb Killington is that I started to notice the surroundings, and that put me in the moment. And I began to enjoy the drive by just enjoying the beauty. And when we finally arrived at Killington, I had forgotten that the goal was to climb the mountain. I had become so content with just looking at the beauty that I was surrounded with. Point being, we have to enjoy the journey. When you enjoy the journey, then you don't have anxiety and frustration about how long is this going to take? How much work is required? Will I be able to do it? It's too difficult. There's too much discipline. Enjoy the journey. And that means remaining in the moment. Just make the attempt through the methods that you're taught, the methods that we teach here. We have 4 pillars of total well-being: the spiritual power, improved mental state, emotional resilience, vibrant health. And what I tell people is, yes, there is a final state that we call liberation or God realization or total enlightenment. It is a constant state of rapture, a constant state of unending joy and bliss. Now that you know there's such a state, forget about it, because you can have the same experience, albeit glimpses, for the day that you're on. And then you can expand those glimpses. This is part of the discipline that we invoke here. Be happy for the 24-hour period that you're on. One day at a time, look for happiness where it is inside you. One day at a time, seek to express love without distinctions and to be compassionate and to serve others selflessly without wanting a reward, just for the day that you're on. And if it doesn't happen in the moment that you're on, there's going to be another moment coming. So that's how to practice. We have to understand, people say, well, the work, the work, the work, and everyone has to do the work on themselves first. Well, in one sense, that's true. But here, meditation is the work. Here, chanting is the work. Here, japa, mantra repetition is the work. Here, extending love through selfless service without wanting any reward is the work. All of that is the work. But these methods also deliver us gradually and more into a state where we can experience love, peace, indescribable joy, and grace. Because in the end, grace is all there is. And we can have those experiences even momentarily for the day that we're on. So I say to people, if you understand and proceed with your spiritual journey, understanding that you have to enjoy the journey. If you keep your mind on the goal alone, you'll never enjoy the journey, and the journey will be more difficult for you. You will perceive it as being too hard. Your ego will tell you you're never going to get there. But if you focus on enjoying the journey, I want to meditate today and I want to enjoy my meditation. Half an hour has gone by. I have to get up to go to work. I haven't really enjoyed my meditation, but I'll come back and meditate again later on today with the intention of enjoying the bliss of the self, right? And so just focus on the day that you're on. If it doesn't happen in the moment that you're in, be fully present in the next moment. And gradually we begin to have more and more glimpses of happiness where it is, of love where it is inside us, of peace, compassion where it exists within our God nature, our God power. And if you just focus on enjoying the journey, then it's not so hard and it becomes easier. Just love the journey. Here's just for the day that we're on. I tell my students, don't focus on tomorrow. Don't think about yesterday when your practice didn't go so well. Just be fully present with your God nature today. for the day that you're on and have as many moments of liberation as you can for the day that you're on, and tomorrow will be a new day, and then you do it over again. Enjoy the journey. And that's the way to engage the discipline. It's also the way that you will not have anxiety and worry over how much work is going to be required or how long this is going to take. You are love. You're so much greater than you think you are. Once you realize this fact, you will understand that you can make quick and rapid strides, and it's really not that hard.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Namah Shivaya.